Good morning, Gators, and thank you for being with us here this morning. Thank you for logging into those Google Classrooms, opening up those knowledge checks, ready to review, ready to mark. So before we get started here, I did want to talk a little bit about what the end of the year here is going to look like. You only have 2 weeks left of school, which means this is actually going to be your last knowledge check of the year. Because this week I'm going to give you a few assignments that have to do with graphing and plotting points on a graph, but we won't necessarily do a knowledge check for it because we're going to move right into the next part of geometry, which is creating some types of maps. And you're going to actually do an assignment at home next week, our final week of school, which is going to be kind of a fun way to end our year together in math. So exciting times, last knowledge check of the year right here. Let's get started. So number one, look at the diagram below. Find as many pairs of parallel line segments as you can. So parallel lines, remember from our video last week, we talked about parallel lines. They're lines that are across from each other that are never going to intersect. We gave examples like a railroad, like lines that are painted on a road, lines that could go on and on and on, but will never cross, will never touch, will never meet. So some examples of parallel lines. One example, this line A to D is parallel to this other vertical line, F to I, which is also parallel to this other vertical line, B to C. So all three of those lines, however long they run on for, they are never going to meet. They're never going to intersect. They're across from each other. So there's one mark there if you have shown me one set of vertical lines that are parallel. Maybe you did A to D and F to I. That's fine. You did not need all three, but maybe you had a couple more. Maybe you also included this N to H. Maybe you also included this G to C. Those are also parallel to this other line F to I. So one mark there if you have shown me kind of one set of parallel lines. Another set is all the lines that are horizontal, so running across the page from left side to right side or right side to left side. So looking at these horizontal lines, we said A to B was parallel to D to C, which was also parallel to N to G. So as long as you got a couple examples there, there's your second mark. And your third mark comes from another set that are diagonal. So we said this E to K was parallel to F to L, which was also parallel to this B to N. You could have also included this M to J. If we look at this line here, that's parallel to this line here. They're both going to continue to run, but they're never going to meet, so therefore they are parallel. They're still across from each other. So number one is out of 3. As long as you have 3 different examples, go ahead and give yourself 3 marks there. Number 2, draw a line segment E to F. So that is this first line segment right here underneath this highlighted area that is E to F. Use what you know about parallel lines to draw a square. Well, I know that if I'm going to draw a line under E to F, so from here to here, it needs to be directly across from E to F, and it needs to be the same distance on both sides. So it needs to be the same distance from this side here to this side here. That's actually what's going to help us draw a square, because now I drew this line down here that's parallel to E and F, and I also drew these 2 lines in here that are parallel to each other, because I knew that I had to create a line here and a line here to make sure that my distance from E to F was the same on the whole line. So if I measured from this point here to down here, it's going to be the same distance as if I measured from, let's say, a point right here to a point down here. So how can I check I've drawn a square? Well, we know that all sides are the same length. They should all be 4 centimeters. And we know that a square, right over here, a square has 2 sets of parallel lines. So even if you don't have that in your answer, please write that part down because that's important. It has a set up here running horizontally. It has a set over here running vertically. So what we'll do for marks here, if you have drawn a line segment E to F that's 4 centimeters, there's 1 mark. Your second mark comes from if you have drawn a square and you said kind of how you know you've drawn a square. Saying something like all the sides are equal, you've created 90-degree angles. But a really important one, and please write it down if you don't have it, a square has two sets of parallel lines. So 2 marks there, one for that first line segment and one for your square. Moving on, last question here, number 3, talking about perpendicular lines. So remember to our conversation last week, perpendicular lines are line segments that run into each other and create a 90-degree angle. So we're going to look down here in A. This line that's running vertically and this line that's somewhat horizontally, it's more at an angle, they run into each other. But do they create a 90-degree angle? No, they do not. Because if we look at this line up here and this line over here, and we look at that angle, it's a little bit less than 90. If we look at this line down here that ran into this line over here, and we draw that angle, it's a little bit more than 90. So therefore, it is not perpendicular. B, these two lines run into each other, they cross. If we measure our angle in here, it would be 90 degrees, so therefore B is perpendicular. So 1 mark there if you said that B was perpendicular because it created a 90-degree angle. We look at D. I'm not sure why there's no C here, but that's okay, we'll move on. D. We have a line here running into a line over here. They run into each other. We measure this angle to check if they're perpendicular. Indeed, yes, it is a 90-degree angle, so therefore D is also perpendicular. And we can check E. We know it is not perpendicular because they run into each other, yes, but there is no 90-degree angle created. So this line up here ran into this line down here. That angle is much larger than 90, therefore it is not perpendicular. Where you get your third mark, so 1 mark here for saying B, 1 mark here for saying D are perpendicular. Your third mark comes from the how do you know? Well, how do we know? 2 line segments run into each other and create a 90-degree angle. So there is your third mark. Somewhere along the line, those 2 line segments, when they touched, when they ran in together, created that angle that was 90 degrees, therefore they are perpendicular. Okay, so a little bit shorter of a knowledge check, touching on 2 main things in this unit to start us off with, parallel and perpendicular lines. I hope we feel comfortable with those. If you don't, please continue to ask questions. Questions are always a good thing. This together was out of 8 marks. So please give yourself a total out of 8. I'll move that over to here. And other than that, we will see you guys tomorrow for a Zoom meeting at 1 p.m. And in that Zoom meeting, I'll discuss kind of what these last 2 weeks of school are going to look like. Also remember that we have kind of a end of the year goodbye happening next week. And I'll give you some more information on that in your Zoom. Your parents were also emailed with a link to sign up for some different times for you to come pop by and say hi and say goodbye. Other than that, please submit your marks either in a comment below or in a private comment. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you very much. Bye for now.